So we are recording live.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for stopping by today. Our guest is an accomplished entrepreneur, game changer, and a thoughtful advisor to the leaders who are building the success stories of the purpose economy. Mike is the president and CEO of Junxion, a firm that for over 20 years has been advising on strategies, sustainability, and social impact for some of the world's most courageous and generative brands. Mike is also chair on the board of directors of Hollyhock and a lifelong leadership learning center on Canada's West Coast, where he is the executive producer of the annual Social Venture Institute. He is the happiest when he's hosting juicy, generative conversations with people and groups in service to life. Please welcome Mike Rowlands. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Mike. How are you doing today?
Thanks for that. Really appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. It's great to see you both. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is great, Mike. Thank you so much for being on our show, and it looks like you're in the big, great rainforest behind you there.
Yes,
love
indeed.
it. Love it.
I took this photo a few months ago.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
that's beautiful. Where are you?
So we're tucked against the foot of Mount Seymour on the north shore of Vancouver.
Yeah,
and our
beautiful.
back garden backs onto a multi-thousand hectare provincial park. So this forest is right behind our home. It's pretty
That's
amazing.
gorgeous. I actually ride over there quite a bit. It's a beautiful. I just love cruising over there and heading up the hill, and then we're actually on the next mountain over. We're on Mount Frome or kind of Grouse Mountain. We're kind of backed up about Mount Frome here, where there's a great mountain biking spot here. So it's lots of fun.
I've done my share of mountain biking in your little neck of the woods too. But
yeah, well, we should get out for a ride sometime.
We'll definitely do that. I look forward to it. Yeah.
So what we do on our show here is we first start out with 2 truths and a lie. And it gives our audience a little bit of a flavor of our guests. So I'm going to read 3 items here. 2 of them are truths, and 1 of them is a lie. So we're going to have to guess because Devin and I don't know what the lie is. So I'm going to start off here. Number 1, Mike accidentally skied off a 30-foot cliff. Hey, I've done that, I think too. Stuck the landing. Well, I've never stuck I always crash. Stuck the landing and carried on downhill as if it was all done on purpose.
Nice.
Well, that's interesting.
Possible.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yep.
We were just chatting before offline here that Whistler got 40 centimeters of new snow today too.
It's a good day to fall off a 30-foot cliff.
Yeah, good day. Yeah. Just landed in the big pillow. And then number 2, Mike met his business partner Adam only after Adam had agreed to buy into the company. Okay, that's a good one too.
Be a weird situation. It's possible, I suppose.
Yeah, that is kind of okay. Number 3, Mike signed a non-disclosure agreement with the royal family, so he can't talk about the aspects of the work he did with Prince Harry. Wow, that's kind of in the news these days too. But you can't talk about it. So,
oh man,
I don't know, Dev. What do you think of Dev?
all very plausible. Let's go with I like the 30-foot cliff one, but let's go with the second one.
The second one, meeting his business partner after he got into the COVID.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the royal family, the non-disclosure on the royal family. So drum roll, please.
It's too obvious. It can't be.
Well, in fact, I did meet Adam after he had already decided to buy into the business. We had a business partner that needed to leave the company, and so we didn't have leadership in our London office in the UK. And one of my other business partners had met Adam and negotiated a deal, and I met Adam probably a year after he'd actually joined and bought into the business.
There you go.
Oh my gosh! Wow,
that one's oddly enough actually true. I do in fact have a non-disclosure agreement with the royal family.
Oh man, no! Oh, you're kidding me.
However, I am allowed to talk about the work.
Yeah.
Quite a long time, but about 10 years ago, we had the incredible challenge and pretty significant privilege of working with the first charity that Prince Harry co-founded.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
Bali, which supports mainly AIDS orphaned youth in Southern Africa in Lesotho, which is that's completely by South Africa. And we did some amazing work studying the landscape of all of the nonprofits that were doing work there and trying to figure out how Prince Harry and his co-founder, the Crown Prince of Lesotho, could contribute to the great work that was already happening on the ground. So it was a big strategy project, and we are allowed to talk about it.
And you are, yeah.
Somewhere in my files, there is an NDA about some aspects of the work.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And he also didn't he also I don't know if he founded, but the Invictus Games, isn't that his gig as well?
Yeah, I know he's involved. I don't know about the founding versus.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely involved. Yeah.
Oh,
So then this 30-foot cliff, then what was that? You just sent it and just stuck the landing.
Got off the top of the peak chair on Whistler and just went ripping around to get around to the back to the top of I think it's West Bowl.
Yeah.
And did a cut down, and then was about to cut back up and just carried too much speed into the cut down and dropped off the backside.
Oh my God.
Landed between a couple of rocks, blind luck, stuck the landing and kept on skiing.
And
The friend that was skiing with me, so I do have a witness. The friend that was skiing with me just sort of stood there in awe, was a little bit freaked out, shouted to ask if I was okay. I just gave him a thumbs up and kept skiing.
You're like, come on down. It's
Wow.
great.
Wow, that's crazy.
It was.
It's funny that because you said that, because I actually did the same thing, but this is like 30 years ago. I was skiing with a bunch of guys that were mountain guides and on the BC ski team, and I was just me. And we did the same thing. Went up the peak chair, hung a right, went down the VD chutes. So I'd never skied these VD chutes. It was a kind of a foggy-ish day, and it was a big powder day, and they were just launching off these cliff after cliff. And I was the last guy. I was at the back, and I saw the tracks, and I just kept going, and I ended up flying off this, like a 30-foot cliff, but I landed poof in, and I just exploded when I hit cause it was nice and soft, but I just exploded.
Double eject.
Double eject. Yeah. And I was on the bottom. I was fine, but it scared the living crap out of me. But yeah, actually, Dev and I were skiing the exact same. We were skiing that 2 days ago down the VDs. Yeah. And it was actually really nice. Yeah.
It was nice. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I guess we should get back on track here. Hey, I don't know. So Mike, there's so much to talk about, and so much that you do. I've been up to Hollyhock a few times, which is I don't know what you call it, a conclave on Cortez Island. You have the Social Change Institute, which I've been to, the Social Venture Institute, which you're a significant part of now. And it's just a wonderful place for minds to get together and share ideas, people from all over the world. And so with what's going on here, in the past year or so here with this COVID, our economies of the world are changing. We're going to come out of this completely different. So I just want to talk a little bit about, what do you think about this next, the next economy? You have here's a quote here that you said, we stand at a moment in history when we have a profound opportunity to rethink the way our economy serves people rather than the other way around. I love that. I really love that's what I'm thinking. And that's what I'm feeling right now. But do you want to shine a little bit of light on what you were talking about there? I think that's great.
Yeah, totally happy to. We've been thinking about this a lot at my firm at Junxion, and we're talking about this quite a bit in the programming work at Hollyhock. And it's a conversation that's bubbling up in grassroots organizations everywhere we work, everywhere we go.
Yeah.
And I've been comparing it of late to this sort of crisis moment that we're in globally, this awful pandemic moment that's been so hard on so many people and so many communities. It really is a global emergency. I've been comparing it of late to the global emergency that was the Second World War.
Yeah.
And it's not a perfect comparison, right? There's really significant differences between the two, not the least of which is we're not fighting against each other in this one. We're trying to get through a virus together. But if we think about the end of World War II and peace finally arrived after 6 awful years, and we were our forebears, my grandparents were coming home from Germany and North Italy. My parents weren't yet born. People were looking around at the landscape in places like London and Liverpool and Coventry in England and in the big German cities, completely destroyed. totally devastated, and wondering what it was going to be like to try and rebuild. What would it look like to rebuild after 6 years of devastation and economies entirely focused on the war effort for that long? Social programs disappeared, food security disappeared, right? Well, we're sort of in a similar moment now where our sense of security has completely disappeared. While the buildings may all be standing, a lot of the enterprises that occupied them will have disappeared. Like, I've seen some data that suggests 50 or 60% of the small retailers and restaurateurs won't be able to reopen. Right. Like, these are small family-owned enterprises that have been living month to month for a long, long time. And this closure, even with the incredible supports that we've had from the Canadian government here, they're not going to get to reopen. At the end of World War II, 730 people got together in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to talk about building a safe, secure, stable economy for the rest of the 20th century. And they designed the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And you can imagine how the conversation was going at that point in history, right? We need to develop a stable peace. We cannot let the world go to war like this again. We also need to help countries recover. We have to figure out, and that's why the International Monetary Fund came up, to backstop governments and help them with the recovery efforts.
Right.
Some really great, promising ideas. And they put finance at the heart of the conversation. And over the course of the 20th century, finance was continually reinforced as the central ingredient in economics. Right? The reports on the GDP and the Dow index and the NASDAQ are the things that we hear at the front and back end of the news every evening. It's all about finance.
Right. Yeah.
And that ethos, that neoliberal economic approach, has dominated the way we've thought about economy for most of the 20th century and up till now in these early years of the 21st. So there was a moment when those 730 people came together and designed a system. It's a bunch of ideas, a bunch of human-made ideas. There's nothing natural about the economic system. We created it. We can recreate it. So the problems that we've seen as we've come into the tail end of the 20th century and into the 21st are problems like an incredible drift between the haves and the have-nots. Right. Occupy Wall Street brought our attention to the 1%, this incredibly wealthy, privileged class of people that owns more wealth than more than 2/3 of the rest of the planet. We've also seen austerity-based economics, right? Where governments have been really committed to balancing the books. And if that meant clawing back social programs, then so be it. And then honoring this principle of free markets and open markets and trying to let business run unfettered. And as we move into the 21st century, we started to see pushback against a lot of that, right? So we're starting to see principles like well-being economics. What's it like to put human and social well-being at the center of our economic thinking instead of finance? And the government of New Zealand passed the world's first well-being-based budget in 2019. And it's, I mean, whoever sits down to read a budget, this one's worth reading. It's a gorgeous summary of the human and social desires.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that, because I know we were so fortunate. We were in Bhutan a few years ago, myself, Devin, and our family, and we were so fortunate to be invited to go. There was a TEDx conference there in Thimphu, is actually which we attended, and we spent several weeks there. But the king there basically said that their country now is going to be measured on gross national happiness. Amazing, as opposed to the other way around, which is unheard of. So yeah, sorry, I just thought I'd throw that in there. It's
another beautiful example, and they have of what happiness looks like, and they have metrics. And they're completely different than financial metrics. Right? How many friends do you have? How often do you get to connect with them? How many laughs in your week? Right? Metrics that really speak to human well-being.
Right.
Well, I think we're at a moment now where we can rebuild the economy in a new way. And we can think about the social purpose and the redeeming social role of business in the context of our community and society. We can think about tax policy and keep some of the safety nets that have helped people feel a bit more secure during this pandemic.
Right.
We can think about we can think about putting new metrics at the center of our economic thinking, like well-being, like happiness, like social welfare. And it's a debate. There's a good, healthy debate about there's a lot of people that don't want to go too far down the socialist agenda.
Yes,
A lot of
yes, that's
people
right.
don't want to go down too far down the sort of neoliberal economic agenda because we've been there. And there's a right balance for these things, but for me, it's really valuable to see so many ideas coming into play that try to balance those things and try to give us a wiser perspective.
So is this one of the key topics that you guys talk about at the Social Venture Institute at Hollyhock? It's one of the because I know Hollyhock or SVI hasn't been able to take place in person this year, but
Right. Yeah, we've had it online for the past year.
Yeah.
I think there's a sort of a philosophical backstop for SVI that speaks to these kinds of questions,
right?
Like the climate emergency, and how business can contribute to solutions, social well-being and well-being economics, and how companies contribute to positive social impact and community engagement. So there's sort of a philosophical backstop to SVI that looks at these, I'll use the word progressive ways of thinking about business. But SVI, as you know, having attended, is this, I love the word, that conclave that you used a minute ago. So it really does feel like that. Gathering of people that are committed to these similar themes and just talking through best practices and new ideas and different approaches. And it's just a lovely space for entrepreneurs, a lot of them first-time entrepreneurs, building social purpose businesses, to get together and build a network of peers that think the same way and access advice and supports from people that have been in this game for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And it really is about sort of skilling people up and equipping them with the networks of support that they need to thrive, and helping them build really vibrant, healthy social enterprises.
It's really kind of interesting because I've been part of a conclave in Boston at MIT for 17 years, and it was part of the Young Entrepreneurs Organization, which became the Entrepreneurs Organization, and there's 75 of us in our class, and it was really a 3-year program, and this is goes way back. And the really interesting thing is that we we loved it so much, we kept it going. We just kept it going for 17 years. And the evolution of my classmates, and we're all business owners, we're all entrepreneurs. The evolution of our mindset and our thinking and the shift that has happened. Mind you, I mean, we are old. We started when we were in our mid to late 30s, and now we're in our 50s and 60s. And just the mindset of thinking to think exactly what you're talking about. First, we were all, full of vim and vigor. Bottom line was the number one thing: make as much money as you can, get outdo your buddy there that's got a bigger boat. That whole crazy treadmill thing that you get on. To a complete, I wouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people, it's this shift to more of a social. What is my business? What am I business doing to help make our world a better place, and also volunteer and give back. Things have really shifted. That I'm really happy to see that. And for somebody like Devin coming up through the ranks, I mean I don't know what Devin's thinking, but like Dev, like for young people in the workforce, so would you guys look for companies that are more kind of socially active, helping and giving back, or I don't know. I'm just what's the opinion of the younger generation these days? Who would they like to work for or work with? Or
Well, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, my answer to that question, we've kind of talked about this before, but it's like with you guys, when you were like in your 30s and whatnot, looking for the bottom line, trying to make $1, that's the most important thing. It was, you guys just didn't have as much, I guess even younger than that, you didn't have as much technology at your fingertips. Right. So, me growing up with basically a smartphone since I was like, pretty young, or we had at least texting, and we had access to the internet, so we can learn so much and we can be more conscious when it comes down to those things. But yeah, it's definitely important to work for a company that is benefiting the environment rather than something like, I don't know, somewhere that's like a McDonald's or, one of these places that obviously takes away and doesn't really give anything back. Yeah, it definitely is. I find that my peers these days, when we have conversations, it's what can we do? But then some people are stuck with having to pay. You got to pay rent, you got to do this, you got to make ends
Sure.
meet. And I'll do whatever I can to get there. Even though that it is kind of like an old custom, but I find some of my other friends who are like entrepreneurs or doing their own thing are definitely working their business towards benefiting the environment and working on these things for our future, because we know we have to make the future for us. We have to make the future for if we want our kids to have a planet to live on, clean water to drink, clean air to breathe. We have to start working towards these goals. So yeah, no, it's definitely important.
Yeah.
And I think
How have your peers been talking about work and working life through the pandemic? Like, there's a lot of people are working entry-level jobs, and a lot of those are in retail and restaurant, and those jobs have been sort of switched off, or at least a big pause button got pushed somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah.
What's it like? Are they worried? Are they?
Yeah, well, it's turned into like half and half. You have the one half that have been collecting or CERB or whatnot, and then the other half that have been putting it in and working. But I kind of get two things that I get when I ask some of my friends. Either this is the worst thing that's ever happened to them. They're having the crappiest year of their life. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do, and they're going to get out of this. Or some of my other friends who are working really hard. It's the best thing. This is the best year that they've ever had in their life, right? Depending on what they're doing, some of them run online businesses, some of them do other things, and it's just like they've gotten so much out of this, and they're like, obviously it's terrible. Obviously, lots of people are losing their lives to this COVID thing, but it's the best year of their life. So it's a little bit. It's just like, and there's no middle. It's just polar opposites, which is an interesting one. Yeah, because there's nobody who's just complacent and like, oh yeah, no, it's just another regular year. It's one or the other, really.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I've been finding that in the business community too. Either it's one way or the other. Either they're thriving or they've had a really, really tough time.
Right.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah.
The same thing. Some of our clients are absolutely thriving. Some of them, because they're just well positioned when people are at home and online, and they're just well positioned to serve people in this time. Others for the wrong reasons. We do a lot of work with social services agencies, these organizations that are typically nonprofits that provide housing supports and homelessness supports and family counseling and supports and addiction treatments and recovery. And the demand for their services are through the roof.
Yeah.
The number of families and people that are struggling through this is really phenomenal. Like, the caseloads are way higher.
Right. Yeah.
And yet those organizations are doing really, really well, and they're providing a lot of jobs. So it's the wrong reasons, but some good outcomes. Really, really tricky balance.
Yeah, it's interesting because Devin and I have a very good friend. He's a Peruvian shaman, and he's a bit of a mentor to myself and has been to Devin for many years. And we've talked about the pandemic and whatnot. And he said something really interesting a few weeks back. He said that this pandemic, it's not like a nuclear war, and it's not maybe not like a World War II. He says it's a gentle nudge. It's a gentle nudge to help humanity kind of get back on track. And it's a tough thing to say because there's been so many deaths, but I do see what he's saying, that it's actually bringing us home to kind of, and it has brought us home. It's all brought us home.
Yeah, right.
To really contemplate, our lives, our future, and what do we do now moving forward to create a better planet. And like Devin was saying, his friends, and there's a lot of people that now have the opportunity for education online, and they think can't go to class, but there's so much because of technology that we can take courses, from everything from master class, or you just go onto YouTube and you can learn anything about anything. And there's if you pick your content correctly, there's a lot of really cool stuff, and there's a lot of people getting educated in this quiet time when we've had to come home. Where that is really interesting. So I think it is this nudge on humanity, like, hey guys, wake up. You need to wake up and smell the roses.
I really like that sort of the optimistic framing that's inherent in that. It's a nudge. This is the universe or nature giving us a push back toward the right path.
Right.
the other things that I think about are that it's also shown us some of the frailties and fractures in the systems that we were using, and sort of given us an opportunity to solve for some of those. And I've talked about shifting the way we think about economics, but the other thing that we need to think about is that there's a large portion of the population that look like us that get the benefit of sitting in our lovely homes against the woods and enjoying these rich conversations and studying online. And there's a huge part of the population that may not look like us and don't have the socioeconomic capacity that we have, that are really, really struggling through this, right?
Yeah.
That we know that the toll that people are carrying in Black and Indigenous communities is much, much higher than the toll that we're carrying in our more privileged ranks. And I totally speak for our family here.
Yeah.
But we've just been like those fragmentations, those differences have been absolutely laid bare for us. It's impossible to ignore those statistics, right?
Yeah.
So what can we do to solve for those? How do we rebuild systems and sort of shift some of that access and share some of that privilege so that we're not so bifurcated as a society in the haves and the have-nots?
Yeah.
That's really what's important about this sort of shift to thinking about well-being, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead, Devin.
No, yeah, I was gonna go somewhere else with the conversation, but what were you gonna say?
No, I just forgot. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, well, with well-being and such, I was just gonna go a little bit off topic here, but I know you're a big advocate for running Hollyhock, and obviously the background is your backyard and like the beautiful trees and being out in nature. And this whole COVID thing, it gets people all kind of cooped up and not really knowing what to do. And I find, for me at least, it's been so beneficial to go outside and be with nature. So I just want to get your input on, why do you think it's so important for people, especially in this time, but in all times, to be grounded and be in nature, at least once or twice a day, do a little tree bathing, if you will.
Yeah. Forest bathing, right? Is it Shinrinyoku or
Yeah.
Japanese practice of forest bathing?
Forest bathing, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're doing right now?
Like I'm doing right now. I do pretty frequently, like on point. So there's a few ways to think about that. So at Hollyhock, one of the things that we talk about is supporting people to do the inner work, right? The understanding of self and the self-development, so that they can be more effective in their outer work in the world. And part and parcel with that is practicing what it means to be in healthy relationship with yourself and with the people around you and with the world, particularly with the natural world. And there's a beautiful humility that comes when you just allow yourself to be one with nature.
Yeah.
And there's a sort of a fascinating rift in sort of the history of Western political philosophy that separated man from nature, as if that could ever really happen. We sort of look at ourselves as masters of nature, right? And a lot of that comes from religious theory, and a lot of that comes from Western scientific theory. But what it's brought us to is this sort of cultural ethos where we consider ourselves separate from nature. And there's many, many cultures around the world where that bifurcation hasn't happened, and they may be healthier cultures. But I think for me, the magic of being out in the woods and just slowing down to that pace and appreciating the just awesome, awe-inspiring complexity of the ecosystems in the forest.
Yeah.
To pretend that we can develop anything that complex and majestic is folly, arrogant folly.
Yeah.
But when you can slow down and appreciate it, and then think about how those systems can inform the way we live and the way we work and the way we build our organizations, there are so many rich lessons to be learned just from a walk in the woods.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a reason people are still reading Thoreau, however many years after he wrote that Walden book, right? It's just that deep immersive experience in the forest that taught him so much about what it is to live a good life and what it is to be in balance. So that informs a lot of Hollyhock's work. That's fundamental to Hollyhock's philosophy.
Yeah.
It definitely informs a lot of Junxion's work, and it informs a lot of my life philosophy too, about the way I try to govern myself and manage myself. Something about moving at the speed of moving at the speed of nature, moving at the speed of relationships, moving at the speed of trust,
Yeah.
rather than trying to get out ahead of all of this and thinking you can control it.
I really find it's an interesting, it's almost an experiment on myself, because back to COVID a little bit here. Before, our lives are so busy. We get up, first thing we do, which is ridiculous, is we check our phone. Right. And your mind starts racing, and you start racing around. You go off to your office or whatever you're doing, and you get on the treadmill. You get on that treadmill, right? But then when COVID hit, you couldn't do that. You weren't allowed to go out. So it was really interesting. Devin actually got me into this. So he got into this Wim Hof breathing. I don't know if anybody's heard about this Wim Hof breathing. So I came down and I was, stressed. I was having some anxiety attacks and things. And he goes, Dad, I've been watching this YouTube, this guy, Wim Hof. It's incredible stuff that he does in nature. He spends all this time in nature and in the cold and in the forests. And he does it. So I lay down and Devin put me through this breathing set, right? The set of 3 sets of 30 breaths, right? And holding. And I felt very calm and whatnot. And I spent a lot of time in the woods and hiking and mountain biking. And I just love being in nature. But what happened during COVID is I got into this routine of every morning getting up early and coming down and doing my stretches or whatnot, inside or outside in the backyard, and doing my breathing, and then doing then he does these cold ice plunges. And so Devin and I've been on this routine of clearing my mind. It's meditation, and spending time in the forest. But now what we've been doing is we've been up at Whistler. There's a lake and it's covered in ice, and there's a hole, and we go jump in the lake, and you go in there for a minute 30 seconds or whatever, do your breathing, and come out and completely rejuvenated. And I hate to say this, but without COVID actually happening, I don't know if I would have I don't know if I would have evolved into this right now. And it's this routine. I do it every day. And right. Devin got me into this, and Reiko does it. My wife does it. Devin does it. His girlfriend does it. We all do this collective, breathing and spend time out in nature every day, and it's really, really, really helped. So I think you're just nailing it on the head. And go ahead, Devin.
I find with you, if somebody, you obviously have quite the busy mind, as you can tell. The wheels are always turning with this guy. Right? Doesn't stop. So for people who have such a busy mind, and it just keeps going, and don't really know when getting into meditation, can't really find a way to meditate. It's almost the perfect way of meditation, because once you get in that water, the only thing you can think of is how damn cold you are. Right? You're not thinking about what's my business doing, how are we gonna make what's happening today. It's literally, I'm just like, you're enduring one of nature's harshest elements, and you're just sitting in the cold, and that's what you have to do, and that's the only thing you can focus on. And and it takes your brain away. And I think that mixed with getting out, doing the breathing exercise and oxygenating your blood, it just calms you to a whole new level, and it's fantastic. So I just wanted to
wonderful practice. I love that you're doing that together too.
Yeah. He pushed me the first time, but I'm actually addicted. It's funny because your body gets used to whatever the endorphins are, whatever's getting released.
Right.
And it's very interesting because we go into the water is like 3 or 4 degrees centigrade. It's very, very cold. And you go in, it's as if you tighten and fight it, you're gonna as soon as you go in, you just relax, you're totally fine.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing thing that your body and your mind can do. It's so I've been exploring my mind and doing so during this period. So nature has really, really, really helped and grounded us all.
You remind me of a learning that I'm navigating this year, is the sort of connection between mind and body. Right. And that I have spent a lot of my life living in my head,
Yes.
Very
Yeah.
intellectual, very analytical, very introspective a lot of the time.
Right.
There are people that are close to me that might have expressed concern that I'm too inside my head. And they're right. They're right, not expressive enough. So
Yeah.
last year I started to think about, well, how can I be more expressive? How can I share what's going in my head a little bit more and just be more open and accessible? And this year I'm really navigating this, the somatics, the
Mhm.
study of the way that the body thinks and reacts and behaves. And just that turn of phrase to me is totally fascinating, how the body thinks.
Yes.
Right.
We know there are neurons, brain tissue in our hearts and in our stomachs. And so what does it mean to think with the whole body?
Yeah.
So I'm sort of on a course of study to learn about somatics and try to learn to think with my whole body.
Wow.
Exactly what's happening when you drop into the cold water and relax. You're
Right.
using the entire body to support,
Right.
push back against what your head wants to do, which is force your vocal cords to scream. And
Yeah. Your fight or
push your
flight
body
mode
out of the
kicks in,
water.
right? It's
Yeah.
like fight or flight. But
Yeah.
if you're able to change that, it's magic. It's magic. I thought it was all a bunch of BS at first, until I started like everything.
You have to be
I always
skeptical.
think it's all BS until
You
I
have to
actually
be skeptical.
try it, and it's stuff just changes your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very simple things.
Yeah.
So moving down through all of what we talked about,
Yeah.
so what would you consider, like, right now it's just like a good life, like having a good life. uh what does it really, like, what does it mean to have a good life? I don't
Isn't
know
that
if
a gorgeous
kind of
question?
that's a tough question. It's just, yeah.
Isn't it
Yeah.
one of the most beautiful questions, though?
It is. No, it really is, because people really don't. We get caught on that treadmill and we forget about it. We get into that rhythm of just getting up, getting in our car, going to work, and then coming home every night and doing the same thing over and over and over. 10 years goes by like that.
Yeah.
So, right. So what do you do you want to talk on that a little bit? What's your perspective? So I'm sure you've got one.
What is the good life is one of the fundamental questions of philosophy, right? And I'm a philosophy grad, so I've used that
Okay.
times. I'm a philosophy grad.
Makes sense.
I mean, Aristotle thought about this stuff. Socrates thought about this stuff. Confucius thought about this stuff. The Buddha. That's every tradition everywhere around the world. What does it mean to live a good life? And there's so many answers, and there's so many right answers. But for me, it boils down to I think just a couple of things. One is having the presence and self-awareness to stay in the experience. Right. So much of our time gets spent on looking forward to what's next, or thinking about what happened and how we could have done things better. And neither of those things helps us stay steadily in the present moment and enjoy the space and the place and the time and the context that we're in. So that's one big piece of it, is just that presence, which is not at all distinctive or unique, right? There's lots of people that talk about the importance of just being present. But the other thing for me, like you said in the intro off the top, is the sheer joy of a juicy generative conversation.
I know.
Right? Like, how are we in relationship with one another? We're in relationship a lot of the time through conversation, dialogue, and the ideas that we get to explore together. And for me, that's such a rich part of life. I think the hardest thing for me about COVID is not having the real life connections, being able to sit down over a coffee or a beer and just have a deep conversation face to face.
I know that we were so fortunate back in 2014, 2015, as we traveled for a year, and we took our family, and I was able to set my business up to pretty much run without me. I was so fortunate, have an incredible guy running everything. And we traveled for a year, and we were kind of off the beaten path. We had one little bag each. We had 3 t-shirts, 2 pairs of shorts, flip-flop, like every photograph I'm wearing the same t-shirt, right, for a year. And which was good. But when we came back, it was really hard coming back, for one thing. But when I came back, people would ask, Nigel, what were your favorite place? Where was your favorite place? Where did you go? And we were in Bhutan and Myanmar and Argentina. We were like, all these incredible places. Like, what is your favorite place? And I just thought about it. I'm like, well, I thought the places were incredible. everywhere we went was absolutely incredible, but they were just a backdrop for the people that we met and the conversations that we had along the way. And we're still in contact with our friends in Myanmar, still with our friends in Bhutan and in Argentina. And I have, these conversations with them, all the time, and we keep connected. And I'm totally with you on that. It's these deep conversations, and our world is a backdrop. Our world is an amazing place.
Mm-hmm.
But it's those human connections. And right now is, for me, it's a challenge right now, because I can't go out and meet people like yourself.
I had a couple of experiences in 2017 that I really only recently, I think, connected the two experiences. So one was a similar extended vacation. Ours, we had a month with 10 family traveling Europe.
Yeah.
And I remember before we went, I asked my dad, what's the thing that you're most looking forward to? And for him, it was having the 10 of us in his hometown of Liverpool.
Yeah.
A lot of friends in Liverpool. And for me, the moment I was looking forward to is I knew we were going to land at Marco Polo Airport in Venice and take one of those teak speedboats across to.
Yeah.
I was really looking forward to that sort of James Bond moment. But I knew this was going to be a really special trip and maybe a once in a lifetime thing. So in the months and weeks leading up to it, I was preparing myself to just be very present every day. And not to spend so much time looking forward to Venice that I missed Liverpool and London and all stops in between. Right. And so if asked the question, what was your favorite part? It was the moment I was in the whole way. Right. Yeah. And of course the place that I was in and the people I was in conversation with, but to be in the moment the whole way through. And I wasn't perfect. I'm not the Buddha. Perfect. But the practice was really beautiful.
Yeah, I know when we were traveling, because these guys were Devin was like in grade, you just graduated from high school, and Kina was in grade 9 or something. So you guys would sleep in, and then Reiko and I would go out early. We'd go down from our little apartment to where we were, and we'd find a coffee shop, and we'd sit and just talk, and we would watch people, and we would chat with the baker. 3 hours. We just do nothing. And then when I came back, people was like, "Oh, you're in Paris. Did you go up the Eiffel Tower? Did you what?" I'm like, no. We had coffee." Because it was just so. The really interesting thing for me was we'd be in Spain or we'd be somewhere, and we'd go to a coffee shop. We'd sit, we'd chat, and then these older gentlemen would come in and they would sit down. They'd meet there every morning for coffee. And they would chat, and an hour go by, 2 hours goes by. One guy would leave, another guy would leave, and then they were all gone. And just that way of life. And another thing was amazing in the evenings, in the piazzas, they would have the row of the seats, and all the grandparents would sit on the benches, and all the grandchildren would play in the middle. And this was like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And the grandparents and the parents, they're all just a big, massive community, just enjoying each other. It was just one of the most incredible things that I've ever seen. And, so.
The other thing that happened for me in 2017 was, I remember finishing 2016 and thinking, maybe this consulting career is coming to a close. Right. I'm just not really loving things at that point professionally. Yeah. But the business was good and healthy. And I love some of our clients, and I love most of our clients, and I love the people that I work with, but it sort of felt like it was time to close the chapter and find something new. I wasn't in a hurry, so I decided I'd take 2017 and just reflect and think about and try to discover what the next chapter might be.
Yeah.
So I worked with a couple of coaches and read a lot of books and did a lot of sort of thinking and homework, and took that trip to Europe. And I got to the end of 2017 and realized that I rearticulated my own sense of purpose, and that line that you read at the beginning really encapsulates for me what's most important, and it is to live my own life as a juicy, generative conversation with people and with groups in service to life.
I love that. I love that service to life. I love that.
And then I look back at my business at the end of 2017, having articulated that to myself, and most of our work is in strategy and planning, which is a giant generative conversation in service to the business. And if we're working with the right businesses, it's a giant, juicy, generative conversation in service to life through business or through the nonprofit. So it gave me this really different frame to look at the work that we're doing. And I fell back in love with the consulting work.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, 3 years later, we've had 3 of the best years on record, and growing really well. And there's got to be a connection between those two things.
But, and you got into your sweet spot. That was right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. There was a gentleman that spoke at my class, my conclave, because we did it online this year. His name is Marshall Goldsmith, and he is I think he's probably one of the top coaches in the United States. He's coached presidents. He's coached all these people. And the questions were, okay, Marshall, we were asking him all these questions. And he basically, I think I've got his quote here. Everybody was asking him about, a life and a good life, and, what's everybody's, mission should be in their life. And he had a simple answer. And he says, our mission in life is very simple: to make a positive difference, full stop. And that really just, it's very simple, but it hits the nail on the head.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
That might be a gorgeous point to end on today.
There you go. I think Dev. Yeah. So thanks, Mike. That was great. I think Devin's going to do a little.
Oh yeah.
Finalize.
One more.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, you got
that I
one more
wanted to
question.
ask
That's
there.
right.
But I had a little point actually before, talking about just traveling, and you were away for 10 months. We were away for a year. Just time and how time can go by so quickly.
Yeah.
And when we came back from traveling, maybe you experienced this as well. But some people, that you kind of have a conversation with when you get back, and they're like, oh, so you were gone for like a month or two, and you're like, no, like a year. And it kind of hit me so hard. I was like, you kind of put some things in perspective. The things that our family were able to do in a year, so many things, met so many people.
Yeah.
But kind of when you're stuck at home here now, like in COVID type thing, it's time just whips by, because you're kind of stuck in that same day-to-day thing. So just that whole point of, get out and live a full life and do things is kind of a huge thing that I took back from that. And I bet you experienced similar things with people that and being
absolutely.
like, oh, wow. Yeah. So yeah, that's just a little point I wanted to throw in there. But yeah, one last question that I would like to ask you, and it's similar to the good life one, but if you could go back to like a teenager version of yourself, let's say little you, Mike, run around high school. All right.
My big curly hair.
Yeah. And you were to express some key points of wisdom that you've acquired over the years, what would be your number one? This is something that you go back and shake into yourself. Hey, this is what you need to know. This is what it's going to be like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the first turn of phrase that came to mind was slow down.
Yeah, it's good.
And the second phrase that comes to mind might not be unique to me, but it feels right and true. And that is, go easy on yourself.
Right.
You've got what you need. You're enough. Take your time.
Fair enough, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That sort of advice.
That's amazing. Yeah. No, that is so important. Yeah. Slow down, take your time. Yeah. Because everything will fall into place, right?
Yeah.
Try to rush or try to work too hard sometimes, but that's beautiful. Yeah, that is really. All right.
That
well,
is, yeah.
I think with that, we are going to wrap this one up. If you want to learn anything else about Mike, we'll put the link in the description. Other than that, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was an honor talking to you, having this juicy conversation, juicy generative conversation with you today. It's fantastic.
I really enjoyed it. It's lovely to connect with you guys. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on.
Thanks, Mike. That was great.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Hit that record.